Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we want to return to the subject of the Zimacube. That's right, I say return to it because it's been about a week or so since we did our article and our full video on this device. Everything we learned about it from the brand that brought the Zimmer board and of course the Zimmer blade, which is reaching the closing stages of crowdfunding there and fulfillment, hopefully by the end of the year and the start of the next. And in today's video I took a lot of your questions, of which by the way there were a lot, about the product, and put it directly to Icewhale themselves in order to get some of the more recurring questions about this product in development. They'll be hitting crowdfunding relatively soon, I would say, and hopefully go through and help you whether you want to jump on this one, or if you want to sit on the fence, or you just want to hang back and wait until it reaches full retail, just in case, like a lot of crowdfunding products, it doesn't happen at all. So I'm going to be going through all of those common questions. I think there is 10, there might be 9 or 10 that I sent to them. They got back to me about a week and a half, based on your questions and indeed my questions as well. So hopefully by the end of this, and I'm sure at the bottom of the screen, you've got timestamps there you can follow if there is a very specific question you have about this device that hopefully has been answered. But otherwise, do check out the video where we covered as much as we knew at that time, and there's been a few additions to this. But without further ado, let's crack on with our question. Number one, probably the question that was asked the most, was pricing. And right now, they didn't really give us a clear answer. And when we asked them specifically, are there any indications of pricing for the Kickstarter campaign, even approximate numbers, the best answer they gave us was the introductory price for the basic version, so that's going to be the Intel Alder Lake N100 version, will be around $500, while the professional version will be around $1,000. Now, they didn't confirm whether that was the introductory crowdfunding pricing or the intended official price if this does reach retail. But to put that into a little bit of perspective there, if you look at kind of Synology and QNAP comparative devices, so we're looking at devices from Synology or QNAP that have got at least 6 bays of hard drive storage, but M2 NVMe support, PCIe upgradability, multiple LAN ports. And when it comes to Synology, the most comparative unit I could find to this was the DS1621, and that knocks around for about $875. Now, again, we are focusing just for now on the Intel Celeron N100 series version. We'll crack on and talk about the Intel i5 version in just a moment. But for QNAP, the most comparative unit I could find to the N100 version was the TS664, 6 bay again, 2 M2 slots, 6 hard drive slots, PCI upgradability, 2.5 gig, and that knocks around, again, we couldn't find an exact pricing for availability because it's not as common as the 4 bay, but still we saw prices that ranged, I saw from about $699 up to $800, depending on which website I went to there. Now, for the more expensive unit, again, the one that Zimmer themselves say they'll be pricing around $1,000, so again, very vague. For that one, it would have to be for QNAP's TVS H674. This is an Intel i5 with 6 SATA bays, a couple of Gen 2 NVMe slots there, PCIe upgradability at Gen 4, and that's got there is an option for expandability towards 10 GBE. Now, that is knocking around the pricing online is very wild and all over the place. A lot of people 38 bay, but we've seen prices as high as $2.5 grand and as low as $1,800 in some places there. So still more expensive than what we're seeing on that kind of vague pricing they've shown us there. But still, nevertheless, I kind of wish we had a little bit more to go on there. I understand that they don't want to nail down a pricing yet until the crowdfunding is either at launch or about to be launched, but still, that's a reasonable enough number. Probably a lot of users are going to be a little disappointed by the pricing there for the Intel one, given the Zimmer board and Zimmer blade were knocking around for such small sums of money. But do bear in mind, whatever that $500 is, and again, we are still talking about something, you know, crowdfunding, so not solid. Nonetheless, $500 for a 6 bay with 2.5 gig with M2 NVMe slots inside, PCI upgradability. It's a pretty darn good price regardless. But let's crack on with our next question. The next question was considerations for ECC memory, because I would say a lot of users were asking about this device arriving with ECC, because if you're going to have that large amount of storage and a serious amount of throughput, nowhere on the official pages did it mention ECC memory. And I asked them about that, whether this will be an additional tier, whether it will be the default line model, and they stated this consideration is being noted. They're in the process of finalising the arrangement for the add-ons, if there is any particular accessories that people are interested in, that people can reach out to them, and maybe that will become an optional extra or a change in development. Now again, I know I'm being interpretive for what we're reading there, because we kind of have to be to a point, but nevertheless, the reason I bring up ECC more than anything is a lot of users, when it comes to serious storage, if it doesn't have ECC, they won't go near it. ECC, for those that aren't aware, ultimately, in its most basic form, when data is passing through the memory, a little blueprint, a little checksum is created on an additional cell, or a NAND flash cell on the chip, and what it does is compare data passing through at the beginning and the end, and then rectifies any discrepancies. And again, this finds things like bit rot or inconsistent data in large-scale cold storage. But bear in mind, there have been improvements in file systems, and I would argue, although ECC is certainly still relevant in 2023, when it comes to home users or lower spec users, the benefits of that and the way they use their data may not justify the higher price tag of ECC. But the other thing worth highlighting is both the CPUs listed in their initial coverage, when they're talking about the inclusion of the N100 or the Alder Lake 1235 Intel i5, neither of those CPUs support ECC memory. So it's not like you can just lump it in there. You can't. Neither of those CPUs are going to include support of ECC memory anyway. So in order to factor in ECC, that would require a CPU change. Something I doubt they're going to do at this stage, and roll out another SKU to line up with the others. Now, my next question was about that Thunderbolt 4 connectivity on this device. Now, this doesn't really apply to the N100 model, but when you look at that larger 10-core i5 model, I do highlight they've got 2 Thunderbolt 4 slots on this. And for a lot of users that have been following NAS for a long time, particularly those in the content creator circles, video and photo editing, Thunderbolt NAS has been something that largely QNAP has dominated. And there are going to be a lot of users that are wondering, when interfacing with this device, sure, accessing it over the network's good, but that Thunderbolt port, is it going to be accessible as a network IP, Thunderbolt over IP? So that meaning they can connect their Mac device via Thunderbolt directly to this via Mac to use it as a kind of DAS or local access storage. And I asked them about this, whether they are going to go down that road, or if that Thunderbolt port, like it is found on most client PC and laptop devices, is a change of host-client relationship and therefore can only be used for storage or maybe supported peripherals. Their response was, the Zimacube client will indeed support seamless network switching upon Thunderbolt connection, providing a streamlined connectivity solution. I don't know what that means. That seems like very creative words there. And again, this isn't me being negative about the product. It is simply that wasn't a clear enough answer for me to say that what we're looking at here is the same as Thunderbolt solutions. And by that, again, as mentioned, we are talking about solutions where the NAS can not only be accessed over the local area network and remotely via the internet, but also directly via Thunderbolt. That answer for me wasn't clear enough in that that's definitely what it does. And if and when we do have one here, we will be testing that out most certainly. Now, when we look at client devices that arrive with Thunderbolt ports, so this is a standard this is a smaller DTX motherboard that arrives with support a 2.5 gig and Thunderbolt connectivity on a little motherboard there. This motherboard here, if you connect to the Thunderbolt device to this, the host device, in this case a Mac or Windows system, or definitely a Windows in this case, that's the host. That means anything connected becomes the client. That doesn't mean you can't work around it. So that means, for example, as I was showing this is a Thunderbolt to 10GB adapter. So you connect this to a Thunderbolt PC or laptop device, and that means you've now got a 10 gig network port. Maybe they will be able to factor in a way where this is built inside it. I doubt it, but maybe it will just be a case of you can use Thunderbolt to 10G adapters on the Zimacube via that Thunderbolt port to kind of create a 10GBE pass-through for a 10GBE connected system. It's just too early to say. Moving to our next question. regarding those M2 NVMe slots. Now, as mentioned earlier on, this device rocks out the gate with not only those 6 SATA drives there for 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch media, but on top of that, there is this extra model here on the side, and that extra model there, as we showed in our article, has got those additional 2 or 4 M.2 NVMe slots on board, which are connected by the sound, and I say by the sound, we got confirmation on that. This board here is removable and is connected to the inside of this device, and images that were sent to us via an NVMe backplane port there inside. And as you can see there, that is taking advantage of a SAS connection, and of course the rest of the hard drive bays are combined SAS SATA connectors, but I'm sure on the other side it will just be standard SATAs. But you're going to be kind of wondering there, when you're connecting these inside there, what are the lanes? Because how many PCIe lanes are going to be afforded to not only that entire backplane that it's connected into, but the speed of each of the individual M.2s on that board that's being slotted inside? And I asked them the question. You can see here, now we know that the 2x4x M2s are on a tray-mounted PCB in the Zimacube Octa and Pro, and now it's just called the Pro and the Standard. What are the lane speeds for those M2 NVMe slots? And their reply was that. I've not taken that out of context. I've not clipped it down. That was the only reply they gave. So with that in mind, factoring in the scale of what we're talking about, factoring in cooling, factoring in spacing, factoring in that almost certainly this additional cavity here is going to be consumed by power cables or stuff like that for the running through of the other components, I think there's every possibility we're going to look at ×1 slots on there. There's still going to be presumably Gen 3 or Gen 4, and almost certainly the the motherboard inside there is going to have at least 1, 2, maybe even 3 M2 NVMe slots on board. But nonetheless, that does still mean that as far as those M2s are concerned, we're still not completely clear what those speeds are going to be. They're definitely going to be Gen 3 or Gen 4 because of the architecture of the system. But remember, we don't know the speeds of individual SSDs in the times factor. And also, that little SAS connector. Is it SAS 12 gig? Is it, dual SAS 24 gig? Who's to say? And the architecture itself, it's still very early days, and this is a product in development. Next up, the use of third-party OS. I think a lot of users had this question in mind because when you do get hold of this device, it is a combined solution. You can utilize Casa OS. That is what this system will apparently be arriving with. Hopefully that will be an improved version of Casa OS that factors in RAID, that factors in a lot of hardware storage controllers, because Casa OS that we've seen that arrived with the Zimmer board and Zimmer Blade, although they're running on x86 Intel architecture, they are really more of a front-end Docker skin. And again, it's very user-friendly with the App Store giving you a lot to play with. This is me accessing the Casa OS remotely via the demo site that you can try out yourselves. But again, it kind of is a polished up Docker, and it is a very good front-end UI, and I will say it does have storage controllers and storage options, whether it is that you're going to accessing via the web browser of your file folder, or accessing it generally via the drives and creating those storage areas. But just bear in mind that when you're comparing that against more established software platforms out there, again, like TrueNAS, like UnRAID, then this is going to come across, at least in terms of storage management, a little lacking. And I say that for now because we don't know if Casa OS will see a sizable update, something we've seen discussed a little online, that will escalate this software that this system is likely to arrive with. Nevertheless, there were users in the comments that did want to know whether it will be able to use third-party OSs, or will it be hard-locked to Casa OS. And they did confirm that they've already conducted tests with TrueNAS. They haven't run the test with UnRAID, presumably on either both configurations or at least the entry-level N100 version. And although they didn't confirm on there that they're happy with third-party OSs, this answer for me at least confirms that that is going to be a viable option with what you want to do with your hardware. They've never really presented limitations with the Zimmer Blade or Zimmer board, so I can't really see that being the case here. But nevertheless, TBC, you never know. I mean, no one would have seen Synology rocking out hard drive limited compatibility, and yet that happened while they're moving into that hyperscale crowd. Nonetheless, let's continue. Now, this was a big one. To do with the cooling of this system. Now, the images we saw on their website of the device, everything we saw seemingly like kind of showing off all of this packed in storage there, and there were comparisons to be made, and I made them against the likes of the Jonsbo N2 or N3, more on that later on. But ventilation wise, we've got ventilation on the front, we've clearly got the ventilation side panel there. I believe that is the one that hovers over the PCIe slot there, and all the way around when we were looking into it, we can see that we've got that pack panel where I'm not seeing placement for fans. Even mounting very small fans, there doesn't seem to be fan mounting there to create an active cooling flow through the system. I'm almost certain there's going to be fans located there behind those storage drives, so around about this location. But nonetheless, there are question marks about ventilation here, because unlike the Jonsbo N2, something we'll talk about later on, which loses approximately 30% of the horizontal block at the base, this is really maxing that out with those M2 NVMe's and 6 storage bays all the way along. Now, when I asked them about the cooling system, and particularly, less so the N100, because it's a Celeron, and, from Topton to even a lot of the classical turnkey NAS solutions we've talked about thus far, cooling isn't going to be as much of a pending nightmare threat. In the case of the i5 and with Gen 4 SSDs, I think it is a bigger question, particularly with the height of CPU fans as well. And they confirmed, and again, we placed a great emphasis on the cooling module, and from a thermal performance perspective, the overall space and CPU cooling are deemed more than sufficient. Our development team will now shift their focus towards noise control and airflow optimization. For further details, you can stay updated through official updates from our KS platform and third-party reviews shared by prominent influencers. I don't know if I come under that heading. We'll find out one day. Who knows? I'll let my mum and dad know. They'll be dead proud. But the point I'm making is, that still seems like cooling, although they've gone for thermal performance, they've gone, yep, this is sufficient for what they're doing. It will be nice when the Kickstarter campaign rolls out to see a lot of those results of thermal management and cooling, because there's a lot of gaps there in that answer. And I'm not saying that necessarily means that this thing is going to be a barbecue, but I will say that when they do roll out that Kickstarter, if they don't include, and if you're listening to this, Zimmer, I swear, if you don't roll out some of that information and data on thermal and cooling, people are going to ask that question, I'd say, within 1 minute of that campaign going live. So again, not a completely clear answer there, and much like we saw earlier on with the PCIe stuff, there's room for improvement, I think, and hopefully when the Kickstarter rolls out, those answers will be better answered for people who are on the fence about backing, frankly. Next up, the absence of 10GBE. Now, this is a very valid question in my eyes, because when you're looking at this thing having 6 hard drive bays, all of those M2 NVMe bays, where's the 10G? I mean, I get it that the Intel version may not have it because it's got 2.5 gig, and even that Pro series they're saying is going to have 4 2.5 gig ports there. But I will say that lack of 10GBE on the larger scale version is super annoying. Like that Zimacube version there that's got the Alder Lake i5, that CPU, we've already looked at the specs earlier, is more than capable of managing a 10GBE port there. On top of that, you've got those Thunderbolt ports there, so it could really work well. So even I was very surprised that there wasn't an integrated 10GBE option. Now, when I raised this with them and looking at those 10GBE ports, the absence of them, I should say, they did say that 10GBE technology has gained significant traction among the community and early adopters. We are actively working on developing corresponding product solutions to meet this demand. You can definitely feel the marketing swizz there, can't you? You will soon witness its integration into our product lineup. As a team rooted in the community, Zimmer is committed to actively addressing and responding to feedback we receive from our users. Man alive, that was polished, wasn't it? But I think ultimately what I read there is either down the line there may be a 10GBE version, or there will be a 10GBE card thrown in, or a 10GBE pledge extra at Kickstarter. Again, that still doesn't mean it's going to rock out with 10G out the gate, which I think is going to make some users go, nah, you're all right, mate. But 10GBE, I'm kind of disappointed that that Pro Series version doesn't have it straight away. But as swizzy marketing as this sounds, at least it means that they acknowledge that that is something of a gap there. Next question, I alluded to this one earlier on, the similarities between this case and the Jonsbo series there. I did ask them, is this a completely unique in-house cage, the enclosure that it's in, or are they working with brands? And again, I highlighted Jonsbo because of those similarities. Are they utilizing third parties to develop that case, or is it 100% in-house? Something we witnessed in the Zimmer blade and the Zimmer board before it. And again, I think that's a relatively sensible question. There's a Zimacube, that is directly from their own website. And on the right, we've got the Jonsbo. How similar is the layout there? Even the angle of the shot is near enough identical in that 3D aided design there. And again, self-plug here, I've already done big comparisons of the Jonsbo N2 and N3 in a number of ways, covering a lot of those very specific elements and differences between them. And indeed, we had a video on that very same thing, talking about the comparisons between these two cases. Now, the reason I bring it up is the Jonsbo cases, particularly the N3, has some serious differences over the N2. One of the main areas being that this system having the N3 system having additional active cooling around the system, and fans, placement for fans to be inserted. And I've just noticed I've put the word C twice in cooler, and I want to hurt myself. But on top of that, on the top here, we have got lots more space for larger, taller CPU fans there. Consequently, more aggressive CPU coolers are going to be possible on the N3, which again brings me back to, is the Zimacube stylized directly or indirectly on the N2 or the N3? And looking at the placement there and the spacing, I would say between the two of them, it's more like the N2. So that CPU cooler on the Pro Series box, maybe the Pro Series will arrive in a larger case. I don't know, I can't speak for them, but their response to this was, the casing is an in-house design. Do you have any further ideas or concerns regarding this aspect? I just did. My main concern being that i5 model needs more space, it needs more active cooling, or you're going to be paying for rather aggressive fan-assisted coolers for the i5 model there, and I just think the spacing for that needs to be a little taller there. Moving forward, we can go for our next question there, and our next question, go ahead, is what made you opt for an external PSU rather than a typical SFX Flex PSU? Now, again, if you go back to my original video there, I did highlight in my original video that I wasn't too clear about the PSU. Now, that video was recorded one day before the official page went up, which I was able to then superimpose into the video a lot more. So the introduction of this video and the second half of that video was actually a day apart. The result being, between the two of them, and yes, I know I've got the shirt there, I actually pulled out the same shirt from the laundry basket to wear it in the second half. The result was that I knew by the second half of the video what the PSU was going to be, as I said in the comments, and even despite of that, it still raised the question mark of that PSU, let's bring it back there, of it having that barrel external PSU, and particularly for the i5, but less so for the N100, because we see plenty of Celeron powered systems with an external PSU. What made them opt, in the case of that i5 model, the 12th gen i5, to go for an external PSU? And they did highlight, we've taken various factors into careful consideration, including the noise level of the power supply, heat dissipation capabilities, overall weight and power requirements. Every aspect has been meticulously evaluated in our design process. The goal was to create a harmonious balance between these elements, ensuring optimal performance. Now, long story short, what that means is an internal PSU would have been massive. An internal PSU would have resulted in a large block going inside that would have taken up a lot of space, possibly blocking airflow. Now, going back ever so slightly to my Jonsbo N2 comparison there, one of the things I don't really highlight enough is look at the spacing there to factor in the 6 bays and the M2 NVMe compared with the Jonsbo N2, which has got those 5 drives, and then you've got this empty cavity space and that PSU there. Clearly, in order to factor in that additional stuff there and still maintain the storage balance, they've had to go with the external PSU. Now, there are going to be users who are kind of annoyed about the use of external PSUs. Now, another question mark, and these are images from my CWWK 6-bay, the AIOT6 NAS from AliExpress, and this was another NAS that had an external PSU. When we went and looked at the back, it had an external PSU there. This arrived, I believe, with a 120 watt external PSU. There was a 2.2 volt version there. And when you got that external PSU, when I unboxed the device and went inside, that external PSU went into a power controller board that was located inside that system. And this was used to distribute the power. So although the system was connected via an external PSU that ran into a little adapter here, a 4-pin adapter, that 4-pin adapter went into the board, which was sending power over here to the drive, sending power to the Mobo, sending power to the M2s, all that sort of stuff. So the result was that it had an external PSU, but it still had an element of internal power management there, for good or for bad. Now, we don't know whether that's going to be the case here, or if they're going to go for a simple DC pass-through adapter that goes directly inside that system, as you can see there. Right now, I don't know where they'd put it. If they were going to put that little board inside, either it's going to live here in this tiny available cavity to then feed into the main system, but also feed up into an external power point that's mounted to the board, because that there, I don't know how well I can zoom in, there is the back of that PSU port, but maybe it'll use an internal power board to, you know, manage output of the power internally to the individual devices. But still, nonetheless, I think there are definitely going to be users that aren't overly keen on a big bulky external PSU. I mean, this is a 120 watt PSU. They do change in size, and the more expensive ones have been able to kind of bring things down a little smaller, but it's going to be at least twice the size of a PSU like that one. So again, if that's not for you, if that's not your bag, then maybe give this one a miss. Next up, maximum PCIe card height. This actually harks back quite a lot to us talking about 10GBE, because there are going to be users that if they can't rock in 10GBE off the bat, they're going to want us to go back to our PCIe slot coverage up the top here. There's going to be users that want to know how big or aggressive the cards they're putting inside are. Harking back, once again, to that image, we can see it's not tall. It looks like it's going to be half-height, and indeed, when we look at the size and the depth of this chassis, again, we're bringing it back there, if it's the same depth as the N2, which is looking like the case, that means you're going to be looking at cards that are kind of that big, that are going to be not tremendously large. And to put that into perspective, as you can see from the image there, that means this is a 68 by 142 card. Now again, that does open the door to dual port 10GBE cards there, even 25 gig cards. Graphics cards wise, you know, going by the image they've showed us there, if we go back to the photo of the rear of the chassis, we can see that it is going to at least occupy dual height cards, which means there are some slimmer and shorter GPU cards in the market that have their own vented fans. But still, on the left, when I asked them about it, they confirmed that the case adheres to the standard dimensions of a 169 by 68 card, which means pretty much you're going to be able to get away with those dual port cards there and some compact graphics cards. But when it comes to more modern graphics cards, and I know this is a big blur of text from LTT, but these are cards from 2017, and as you can see, 269, 310, 298, any kind of modern graphics card, forget it, that's not happening. You're looking at much more limited cards with that space to play with there. But there you go, those are the most frequently asked questions I could find from our original video that I canvassed and put directly to Icewell. Now, I am in talks with them about getting a prototype unit here on the channel to run tests, so when that arrives, I strongly request that you send over what you want to be tested on this device. I don't know whether that will be in the next few weeks, it could be in the next few months. Again, until it hits crowdfunding, if it hits crowdfunding, if it's legit, loads of TBCs there. If it does arrive with us, obviously we'll run our tests, and I'll need recommendations from yourselves on what those are going to be. Now, maybe you'll come up with more questions, stuff that I've not covered or missed. Do let me know in the comments, and maybe we can put those directly to Zimmer before their crowdfunding campaign starts. In the email they sent me, they said they're aiming for early November to roll this out, but they wouldn't be much more precise than that. And right now I'm recording this on the 25th of October, so, you know, relatively soon. But for now, what I'm going to do is put together all of the questions and answers we've got thus far into its own dedicated article that, although it's not live now, will hopefully be live by the time this video goes out, so do stay tuned for that. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Again, I can't stress this enough. We are talking about something that's going into crowdfunding. You're not going to Amazon, you're not going to your local dealer, you're not going to B&H and getting this off the shelf. This is a solution that's going to be going into crowdfunding, so keep that in mind when you're looking about putting money towards a product like this. But again, we are talking about a brand that's already rolled out the Zimmer board and the Zimmer blade to quite a large acclaim, I would say, online. Any criticisms that have rolled out have largely been dedicated to these devices being much more affordable. This is a different kind of solution, so make of that what you will. But thank you so much for watching. Again, free advice section, linked on NAScompares, right hand side of the page. Just put your request in there for free advice. Alternatively, you can take advantage of the Discord. You can go over to the Community NAScompares forum. And of course, if you are interested in learning more, you can head over to Ko-Fi, where on Ko-Fi you can go ahead and enter our membership tiers for access to expedited support, early access to these videos, our content polls every month, and our monthly Zooms and seminars where we talk about different storage subjects, do interviews, and of course early access to a lot of these videos in advance. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.